podcast is brought to you by AlleyRepair.com. Don't leave your skee-ball machines lying around collecting dust in the basement. Let AlleyRepair.com bring those machines back to life. High-quality workmanship for your skee-ball playing needs. Contact AlleyRepair.com today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Fro Football Podcast. This is our signature episode of the podcast as we prepare for yet another exciting season of fantasy football. That means the fantasy draft. This episode, we will discuss each position, covering the top 20 players at each spot. We'll finish off with a fantasy mock draft of the first couple rounds, and hopefully address all of your questions and comments that you've sent into the Sound Off line the last couple weeks for those who've been looking for information on fantasy football. Let's get started. First off, I want to welcome my guest tonight, good friend of mine, great fantasy football player, been playing with my league for several years. I have my buddy Jason Peters here. Hey, Jason.
Hello.
He is here to give me some of his analysis. We're going to kind of go back and forth and talk about players and who we like at the different positions. The interesting thing for us is we both play in the same league. So in the interest of not giving away our own draft strategies, I'm not going to be talking about players as if I want to take this guy right this second. Even when we do the mock draft, I think that's really, we're just going to be kind of going back and forth of here's all the guys that are left and here's who we probably somebody should take next. It's not really, we're not going to be sitting here filling out roster sheets and figuring out, oh, I already have 2 running backs, I better take a wide receiver. We're not looking at all that. However, what we do want to do is make sure we address which players we like at what slots in the draft, so you can get an idea. If you're drafting and there's somebody who we rank very highly and you're really on the fence, maybe we can help inform your decision about whether or not to take them at whatever position you have the opportunity to do that. Tonight we're going to get started with the less flashy players, the least valued position probably in all of fantasy, my opinion the most important position in all of fantasy, and that is actually the kicker spot. So we're going to start with the kickers. Jay, I don't know about you, but when we draft in our league, for those who are listening who have never been a part of our league is very unique. We cannot draft backups until we fill out a starting roster. So what I mean by that is we have to take 1 quarterback, 1 running back, 2 wide receivers, a flex player, a tight end, and a kicker before we can take any backups. We can take our defense at the end of the draft. It's a very unique concept, one that frustrates people every year, but it makes our league very different, very interesting. It's even funnier when you see the draft software analyze our draft. They always give us bad ratings whenever we draft a kicker in the 7th round, but that's just what happens. So as we go through this, in my opinion, and you can tell me if you feel differently, I actually think the kicker thing is a big deal. I think the kickers are a big difference.
It can be a big difference, but honestly, there isn't really one standout kicker who is just night and day better than everyone else. I mean, at this point, you have a pack about the top, say, 7 to 10 that are all fairly comparable. So this is something that, in my opinion, I just go with a more reliable veteran player like, a Sebastian Janikowski or a Steven Gostkowski, Justin Tucker, someone,
I'm with you. I'm confident as long as I get somebody who I feel like is going to be there all year. In this day and age, it seems like kickers, teams cut them left and right. But you've always got those ones that are always there. The Gostkowskis, you say Gostkowski's name. For me, he is at the top of the list. As we're running down the kickers, my number 1 kicker is Steve Gostkowski, only because he's been doing it so long and on a team that scores so many points. Who do you got at the top of your list?
I'd probably take Justin Tucker, just because I think Baltimore's offense is pretty good, but they lack that goal line threat, so I see them hitting a lot of field goals.
I'm cool with that.
Yeah, that and the combination. He is a good, solid veteran kicker who's more or less lights out.
Absolutely. I would tell you, and just for everybody's reference, I'm a huge fan of the Fantasy Index. Go to fantasyindex.com if you want to check out their book. There you can download a PDF version of their guide. And I use that quite often because they typically give great analysis. But when I was looking at the kickers, they have Chris Boswell slated in at number 3. Now, I don't know about that for myself personally. I think that Big Ben and the Pittsburgh Steelers drive down the field and score a whole lot of touchdowns. That means a lot of extra points to me. Fantasy Index has him as the 3rd best kicker in the league. I don't know how I feel about that, considering, one, his time in the league has not been that long where I feel like he's an elite kicker. Not to mention there's people behind him I think actually may be significantly better. Jay, what do you got coming in after Tucker?
After that, in my listing, I have Matt Bryant and Dan Bailey.
Yeah, see, I have Dan Bailey coming in before him, too. Mason Crosby, another solid one. Like, I don't understand how Boswell is so high when Mason Crosby's on the Packers, who score constantly, and he's further down the list. I don't get that.
Boswell at 14.
Yeah, I would be okay with that.
Pittsburgh is a prolific scoring team, but they do find the end zone most of the time. At least in the recent past, they haven't been a big field goal team.
Yeah, I don't know. I love the book by Fantasy Index, and just so people understand, when I get the Index, I get weekly updates emailed to me from the Index. It's one of the features you can pay for, and this is the brand new rankings. So I don't know what they're looking at. I don't see it. I don't see Boswell being that high. I agree with Jason here. I think Dan Bailey, significantly better. But another one that surprises me on the list that I have, the next kicker listed, is actually Caleb Sturgis for the Philadelphia Eagles. Does that shock you at all?
Kills me as an Eagles fan, but yeah, the Eagles seem like they may still have, even with the addition of the new wideouts, issues finding the end zone. And Sturgis was hitting some pretty deep bombs last year, and he was fairly lights out from anything pretty much 45 and under. So
yeah, I guess. Yeah, he's relatively accurate. I know he had some trouble at the beginning of the year, but he was relatively accurate toward the end.
Most of the issues he had was 45 plus.
Yeah,
I can tell you that just from being a fan and watching him personally. A couple of the daggers that I saw, but for the most part, he was shorter fielders, especially dead on.
When I look at their roster, like you mentioned earlier, Mason Crosby, I personally, if I was doing my own list here, I would probably move him up a few slots. The Index has him coming in at the number 6 kicker. I know yours had him a little higher. I agree with that. It looks to me like the Index is going with all the teams that score a lot of points in like the 6 to 10 range. They have Crosby, and then they have Matt Bryant for Atlanta because the Falcons put up so many points. How high do you have Bryant listed that high?
I have him on my list that high, but I want to question that because they have. It's another team. I mean, I guess they're just such a prolific offense that they're going to score that many extra points, I guess, to make up some of the difference. But they're another team that rarely hits a field goal.
Yeah, when you think about when you've got the quarterback like Matt Ryan, you've got Julio Jones, you've got Tevin Coleman, you got Devontae Freeman.
I was going to say Freeman.
Even the tight end is solid. It's I don't know. I don't. Well,
I think we're leeching off a kicker already here, Fred.
Yeah, it's tough. I have Cairo Santos coming in next with Kansas City. I'm actually a little surprised that he's that low, considering they put up a lot of field goals, not nearly as many touchdowns. And now with people like Jamal Charles out of the picture, and all the reports coming out that Spencer Ware isn't doing so well in camp and whatnot, Alex Smith being pushed by Pat Mahomes, I don't know that they're going to be putting up a lot of points at all, much less the ability to put Cairo Santos into the top 10.
He might be all of their points.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. I get that. I do. Who do you have next on your list?
Well, I have Adam Vinatieri after Mason Crosby.
So. He's a tough one for me. On the list that is released here, they have him at 17 on my list. And I think the reason they're doing that is because there's so much mystique right now about Andrew Luck, whether he's going to be healthy or not at the start of the season. But I don't really think that matters. You've got, all right, I know he's 33 years old or whatever, Frank Gore at your running back, but the guy has had 1,200 yards like every year in his life. Frank Gore's your running back. You've got T.Y. Hilton. You've got Philip Dorsett. You've got your core wide receivers. I just see that team putting up points. I'm a little surprised to see, Vinatieri, who's probably a Hall of Fame level kicker, be so far down the list. And you got other people, I'm looking here. We got Blair Walsh from Seattle's up at 10 on this list. Will Lutz of New Orleans. I actually kind of expected Lutz to be a little higher just because of the points that New Orleans puts up. I see Matt Prater on this list coming in at 12 with Detroit. Matt Prater can boot the snot out of the ball in Detroit. I don't know if anybody's been paying attention, but they have a new rookie wide receiver who now got moved into the starting roster, who could help them put some points on the board. And maybe they don't score as many touchdowns, but that's a good thing for Will Lutz. Or I'm sorry, for Matt Prater. So, I don't know. I have Janikowski coming in 13. Where do they have him on your list?
9.
Okay, so it's
right
pretty...
above Matt Prater.
Yeah, go figure. So, and then, moving on through the list, we got Phil Dawson in there with Arizona. Arizona puts up a ton of points. Solid kicker. But I hope everybody understands, and maybe we won't get to 20 of each position, because at this point, honestly, the difference between Nick Novak and Brian McManus or whatever is very little. But what I hope you understand is Jason and I just covered 15 kickers. And most traditional leagues go between 8, 10, or 12 members. what that should tell you is every single person should be able to get an extraordinarily serviceable kicker without having to pay a premium for that. Now, the only possible debate, I think, is with somebody maybe like a Gostkowski, because they just put up an insane amount of points. I think somebody said last year he had like 145, or he's projected this year to have 145 points. That's an obscene amount of points for a kicker, but it's because of the team he plays for. But outside of Gostkowski, I don't know that there's a reason to draft a kicker anywhere near the top of the draft board, even in the middle of the draft board. I would wait till significantly later. What do you think, Jay?
I mean, in the top 15, I have the point range, just going from 15 to 1. You're looking at a projection of 125 to 145 points. It's not a huge spread.
Yeah, that's one good week of a running back somewhere else.
I mean, the top 2, I have Justin Tucker listed as a projected 145 and Gostkowski at 140, but after that, each spot is like 1 point of a dip.
Yeah.
Averaging down.
Yeah, and this point thing here, I mean, it looks like they have the projection for Gostkowski at being a 9.1 fantasy points per game, and they have Tucker at 8.3, but after that it drops down to like 7.8, and everything from number 3 all the way down to number 15, Nick Novak with the Houston Texans, go between 7.5 and 7.8. So people, if you're listening and you're one of those people who people push you like, oh, you didn't get a good kicker, you don't have to. You can get one later. That being said, we're going to move on a little bit. We're going to talk tight ends. We'll cover our top 15 tight ends. Maybe we'll go top 15 for each thing. I don't know. We'll see. We're going to play it by ear. We're winging it tonight.
I think top 15 covers it.
Yeah, everybody gets a starter. So, maybe with the wide receivers, running backs, maybe we'll go a little deeper.
You have to because you have multiple. But at least for single positions like this, or even quarterback, maybe top 15.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. So what do you think, Jay? Top tight end, who you got on your board?
Well, this is a pretty obvious one. It would be hard to say otherwise, but I mean, Rob Gronkowski is a beast.
I think
he's a unique offensive weapon at tight end. There's a few that come close, but that he's head and shoulders above everyone else.
You know how my fear is with him is getting hurt. He seems to get hurt quite often. Last year missed a lot of time. I think if I saw him there and I was ready to pick a tight end, I would probably take him over anybody. But I think if I had a solid set of wide receivers, solid set of running backs, a quarterback, everything was nailed down, and I had an opportunity to grab a tight end, I almost think I would rather have Kelsey out of Kansas City. He's the biggest part of their offense ever since Jamal Charles started having issues. And that's not who the Fantasy Index has. Fantasy Index has somebody else slated in at number 2. They do have Gronkowski at 1.
Kelsey firmly at number 2.
Oh, the index here has him down at number 4, which kind of shocked me. Which is bizarre, too, because he's rated to play full 16 games and get 8.2 points a game. And he's slated behind someone who's projected to have 8.1 and 7.9, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. But yeah,
no, I have him as a firm number 2, actually significantly over my 3 and 4, which are Jordan Reed and Jimmy Graham.
So you have Jordan Reed and Jimmy Graham coming in that high. Now, yes. The index has Graham coming in at 2. So I'll give that. I think my issue with Jimmy Graham is he's not Jimmy Graham who was in New Orleans. Now, I know they said he shedded 20 pounds this year coming in. He's supposed to be a lot lighter and quicker and all that kind of fun stuff. But Russell Wilson doesn't use the tight end the way Drew Brees did. So I'm shaky on Jimmy Graham, at least with the index having him at number 2. I'm probably okay with him at 3 or 4. And then you said Jordan Reed. The index has Reed at 5, which kind of shocked me. He's got the second highest projected points per game at 8.7, but they also only project him to start 13 games. And I'm sure that's probably why they moved him down.
I've got a question on here. Forgive me, I don't follow the Washington Redskins that closely, but I haven't listed his injury status out.
Well, he does have an issue right now with the injury, yeah. And the thing is, he's had that every year. He's never finished a season. I want to say something like he's never played more than 12 games in a year in his entire career so far. So I have a tough time putting him at that high. I had him last year, and he was so frustrating because you want to start him every week, even when he's hurt. They say, oh, he's doubtful. Well, if he's doubtful, I don't start him. But if they say questionable, you wanted to start him anyways just because he's that good when he actually plays. And then when they brought him back, when he did get healthy, they didn't throw to him. He was like a decoy. I don't know if I could take a top 4 tight end pick on Reed, but somebody who I think is completely underappreciated is Greg Olsen. That's who the index has at 3. I would actually argue Greg Olsen should be number 2 or 1 or 2 on the list. Gronkowski with the injury, Kelsey for me would be my number 1. I think Greg Olsen comes in as my number 2 just because of the consistency and rapport he has with Cam Newton. How high do they have Olsen on your list?
6.
Wow.
I mean, he's still obviously one of the top tight ends, but they have other, they have Tyler Eifert from Cincinnati above him. Sorry if I'm butchering the name.
You know what? I like Tyler Eifert too. He's another injury guy though, which kind of surprised me. They have Jordan Reed slotted on the index as starting 13 games this year and Eifert starting 15, which I don't get since Eifert missed most of last year. Eifert will be interesting to see this year. They've got some more weapons on the team, and if he actually stays healthy, he may make a push to move right up the list and get into the top 5. My 6 is actually Zach Ertz, Philadelphia tight end. Zach Ertz has been a promise.
I don't see it. And I'm an Eagles fan, and I want him to succeed, but I just don't see it. He makes receptions, he gets yards. So if you're in a league where yards are heavy and that matters towards your scoring, great. He doesn't find the end zone hardly ever.
Yeah. And they have him projected to get 7.1 points per game. So everybody understands, we are not at least I'm not using a PPR list. I'm using the standard scoring system, which they're talking about the 4 points for a passing touchdown, 6 for scoring a touchdown, blah, 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 and a point for every 50 yards, rushing, receiving, whatever. So it's not like I'm using a PPR league. And they have him rated that high. I'm a little surprised. Zach Ertz, he has been supposed to be so promising, talented, all this stuff, the future of the tight end position for Philadelphia. We're 3-4 years into this, and he's just not getting it done. And I'm with Jason tonight. We're both in the Philadelphia marketplace. Like, we get a lot of Zach Ertz vision. We get to see him every week, and I just don't see it. Like he said, I see catches, I see yards, but I don't see touchdowns, ever. Maybe they're trusting Carson Wentz. I don't know.
But even then, Wentz has so many other weapons now.
And you got the Nelson Aguilar and coming back into his own, becoming a slot receiver. No Jordan Matthews anymore, so now maybe Zach Ertz carves out a little.
I think their other off-season additions might be better. But then again, Nelson Aguilar, if he can just catch the ball. Sorry, I'm trying not to curse. But if the man can just catch the ball.
Can you tell we got a passionate Eagles fan here?
He is fast, and he can outmaneuver defensive back. It's just, he has butterfingers to the extreme. And it's... Anyway.
This is why I'm glad. See, we're here in the Philadelphia marketplace. Jason would be the first one to tell you, I'm actually not an Eagles fan. I like the Eagles, but fantasy football ruined me. I like players, and there's not a lot of players on the Eagles that I like. So if I have to pick a team, I pick the Chargers every time because I was a diehard LaDainian Tomlinson fan, and I loved Drew Brees when he started, and Antonio Gates and stuff like that. But man, I feel for Philadelphia fans right now because they really do have a decent team right now. We're just hoping they put it all together. I'd love to see the Chargers and the Eagles in the Super Bowl. I'd be kid in a candy store if that happened. But man, I can't see Zach Ertz doing it. My list has Delanie Walker coming in from Tennessee at number 7. I don't know where he ranks on your list.
I have him down at 13.
That doesn't surprise me.
In case you're wondering where my list comes from, it's basically based off of the Fantasy Football Toolbox list.
It's cool.
FFToolbox.com.
So if you're looking for another resource, check that out. FFToolbox.com provides position rankings, overall rankings. Check that out. Look, fantasy football fans, if you're a veteran of fantasy football, one, you're either not listening to this podcast because you already think you're a know-it-all, or two, if you are listening to the podcast, you appreciate other people's perspective and hope to get some kind of input or sway in what you're going to do. And if that's you, and if you're listening, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast listening audience, and I hope you find what we're saying to be valuable. But when we look at these rankings, and I've got a guy at 7 and he's got him at 13, you got to wonder where these different companies are coming up with these rankings. Now, the only thing that I can think for Delanie Walker being so high is that being on Tennessee with Marcus Mariota, who they think is going to throw the crap out of the ball this year, maybe that's why they're bumping him up. But on that team, they've added Eric Decker. They've drafted a new wide receiver. They already had a couple that did very well for them last year. I don't see Delanie Walker making the next step. On my list, I have Kyle Rudolph coming in next. Minnesota. Where's he at on yours?
have him at 11.
All right, so that's relatively close together. You know, I like Kyle Rudolph, but he's not a touchdown machine.
The one that's on my list that I probably, if I would rank a little higher, is Martellus Bennett.
I love Martellus Bennett. And being in Green Bay, oh my God.
Yeah, he's another weapon. I mean, he's, if I recall, he saw the end zone quite a bit last year.
Yeah, and you know, he's been with Tom Brady. He spent a year in New England, and then he got to go before that. He's in Chicago. I understand it's Jay Cutler, but he did really, really well in Chicago. So I'm actually a little surprised he's not higher up the list. I know we had Gronkowski and Bennett last year, so you got to factor that in. That took away from Bennett's targets, not added to them. So now he's the show. He is the tight end for Green Bay. There's no reason to think that he's not going to shoot up the list. The thing is, for him to move up, somebody else has to move down. And one of those guys, the index has ranked at 9. I don't have nearly that high, is Hunter Henry. And the reason I don't have him that high is because he's still competing with an ageless Antonio Gates for touchdowns.
I was looking at the same thing because Hunter Henry is ranked at 8 on my list, but man, I have a hard time seeing Antonio Gates out of the top 15, let alone as low as 20.
Yeah, I don't even have him in my top 25 on my list here.
That's insane.
Yeah, and you know what? It's because they spread the ball around so much. That, and they are the most injury-prone team I've ever seen. And it's not because I'm a fan of the Chargers. They just are. They've already had multiple losses along the offensive line this offseason. It's going to be another tough year for Charger fans, especially with the move to Los Angeles. That's a whole nother conversation. But, you know, it's hard. I can't see Hunter Henry being that high up the list when you know you've got a bona fide Hall of Fame candidate opposite side of the field from you who's going to be stealing targets. I actually have Eifert coming in after Henry, who, other than the health aspect of things, I think Eifert belonged way up the list like he was on yours. But the next guy on my list is one that is really intriguing to me, which is Eric Ebron. You know, he's done nothing in Detroit to indicate that he's a stud, but every publication I look at this year talks about how this is his breakout year. Eric Ebron, that he's going to be Matthew Stafford's go-to guy. I don't see it.
I have him ranked at number 9, and honestly, I agree. I just don't see it.
Number 12 is where they have Martellus Bennett on my board. I don't know why he's that low. They have Jack Doyle over in Indianapolis coming in at 13. Is he even on your list?
He's on my list at 12.
Wow, that blows my mind. And after that, I mean, the waters get muddy. I've got Cameron Braid, I've got Jason Witten, Kobe Fleener, Austin Hooper in Atlanta. So it gets really muddled at that point. And the estimated points per game goes between 5.8 and 4.8. It's literally 1 point difference. Is there anybody that stands out on your list that's left over?
I know he hasn't done anything well, but Ben Watson in Baltimore is one of those that puts low on my list. I just see him being a little higher.
You know, I think the problem with Ben Watson is he was out to injury last year. He's coming back this year, but all their tight ends in Baltimore are hurt. You know, Crockett Gilmore injury issues. They're right now, they have almost nobody in the tight end position to catch the ball. They signed Larry Donnell. I know that's going to eat into some of the catches. And, you know, they have other players, but Ben Watson, when he was in New Orleans, almost had like a renaissance of his career, and now you're looking at a situation where he can't even crack the top, you know what I'm saying, the top 20 tight ends. He's not even on my list, just to be honest with you, at all.
No, I have him at 31. That's why I'm saying, I'm looking at that, I'm like trying to figure out why so low.
Yeah.
I would have, I'm not saying he'd be at the top, but you know, if you're late in the draft and you need to pick up a spare tight end and he's sitting there, it might be a hidden gem.
That's all the time I have for this episode. Check back with us next time. We're going to run down the quarterbacks and the running backs that are available for you to draft. We'll give them conversation and wrap up as well. Special thanks as always go out to bensound.com and purpleplanet.com for producing all the music and sound effects that we use throughout today's show. And a U.S. News and World Report Best Colleges 2018 available now at amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. Get your copy if you're looking to get into high school, out of high school, get into college, university, or just looking for a career change and you need some adult learning. The U.S. News and World Report Best Colleges 2018 has all the information in there to help guide your next career path. And speaking of that, shoot over to our website at frolifeplanning.com for all your higher education needs. Remember, Fro Life Educational Planning is for today, for tomorrow, and for life with Fro Life. I'm Fred Froelich, better known as Mr. Fro, and thank you so much for joining us for this special draft episode of the Fro Football Podcast. Check back with us in a few days for our next episode. Take care, everybody.